Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 1-0 podcast. I am Avery Hill.
I'm Will Horseman.
I'm back. I spent last week covering women's soccer, which you can check out on my canvas. But today we're going to talk about some Penn State bye week stuff. We're also going to touch on the transfer portal. Will, what have you seen from Penn State? What do you think Penn State needs to focus on for the bye week?
Yeah, so I think what's most interesting is Drew Allar's play through 3 games. I think the general consensus is that he's been a little bit inconsistent. It's not just a little bit. He has been inconsistent. You look at him, you see his pass to Pena in the game again this past weekend against Villanova. He truly just threaded a needle. Probably one of the best passes he's thrown this season. But then he has passes like his interception that was kind of just a not good pass, no matter how you shape it. So I think that's probably my biggest thing of this bye week. Is Drew Allar needs to really put it together because obviously entering this season, it's the thoughts were he finally has a wide receiver core. This could be the year he puts it all together and could lead Penn State to a possible national championship and then become a possible first round pick, a very high first round pick. But I think so far it's though his potential is nowhere near been met yet, and Penn State still needs more out of Drew Allar if they want to beat Oregon, Ohio State, and because if not, I really don't see how Penn State beats Oregon or Ohio State if Drew Allar's playing the way he has. But I'm also under the assumption that Andy Koltnicki hasn't really broken out the playbook too much since obviously it's those three games they've played so far, not notable opponents. There's no need to really reveal your playing cards right now. But yeah, Drew Allar just inconsistent. Just needs to try and just put it all together in these coming weeks.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you mentioned is the part that's not hard to judge, but it's weird because, again, you're playing nobodies and everyone's expecting you to absolutely kill them. But at the same time, you're working with a playbook that is pretty vanilla. It's very predictable. I'm pretty sure Villanova, you could kind of tell they knew their routes. It was a very predictable offense. You're not going to open the bag of tricks too much, even though I will say Villanova was the most you saw that. And that was, by me saying that means that was jet sweeps. We all know Penn State was going to do that, whether it was going to be Trevor Pena, whether it's going to be Devontae Ross, whether you're going to throw Liam Clifford in there on some, Josh McDaniels play calling style type of thing. Sorry, I had to say it.
John Donovan, 2014.
Yeah, so
that offense was, yeah.
Yeah, but I just think it does make it hard to judge. But obviously, Drew is picking up a lot of flack. If you look at last year, if you look at last year through the first 3 games, which you had West Virginia, you had Bowling Green, you had Kent State. I would say 2 cupcakes, one that. Again, people thought West Virginia was going to be a close game, but I don't know. Me personally, I didn't think that would have been the thing. Obviously, they have Rich Rodriguez now for a reason. But even in those games, if you look at purely numbers, he was throwing about 200 yards. I think he hit 3 for the Kent State game, which, again, I would hope so. But I also think that's something that you hope so for Villanova. And it's not that, yards are everything. Let's read out a stat line against Villanova. 209 passing yards on 16 completions, 55% completion percentage, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Your concerns is that interception and that completion percentage. I do think that it's fair to criticize a quarterback for not showing up against an FCS squad. I will say Villanova is a competitive FCS squad. Last year when they played Maryland, they lost by about 20 points, which is, again, competitive for a lower-level school. But I think at the end of the day, if you're Drew Allar, you have to step up. I think the biggest thing is people have been waiting for Drew Allar to take that next step to, being elite, to being, that guy. Again, he had Heisman hopes going into this year, and if you're not able to dominate, Nevada, FIU, and Villanova, it's who can you really dominate? I think that is a really big key focus, and I think it more has to do with consistency. I think a lot of what we talked about was Penn State has moments of where they build momentum, and then later in the game, you'll have no clue that ever happened because it's about getting in rhythm. It's an issue James Franklin has always mentioned. It's something he mentioned right before essentially he fired Mike Yurcich, after the Michigan game. We've got to get Drew in rhythm. And, 3 years later, it's still a problem. I think that is a big point of concern. I think that Drew is, off touch on a few throws. I don't know if it is, him overthinking. Maybe he's trying to do too much. I'm not sure. But I think when you're in year 4, especially as a quarterback and in as one. He's a 3-year starter, but even then, with the reps that he got in year number 1, you can basically consider him in terms of his mindset. He should be as a 4-year starter. He should be ready to go. And again, even 3 years is enough to have that type of experience. So I think I don't know. I think Drew is not really taking on the season as people expected him to. I think another thing I noticed is that he hasn't been. Maybe it was overblown last year with the Lamar Allar thing, whatever. But I think he hasn't really used his legs as much. He had 18-yard run against Villanova, 11-yard run against Nevada, but we saw him run a little more than he did. Again, he might also be preserving himself because, when he did run, I will say if I was, James Franklin, I'd be like, ooh, you should have slid on that, or you should have got out of bounds right here. Like, he took some hits. I will say that. But, yeah, I think that's really the thing. I don't think it's, over. But I think, when you go into bye week and you know that you're coming out with Oregon, I think that's kind of a big thing you kind of want to focus on.
Yeah, obviously, like, these first 3 games, I think I've mentioned before, it's like you want to look like the number 2 team in the country if you're Penn State. But it's like I think it also probably arguably a bigger thing is just stay healthy because obviously there's way more to lose when you're playing Villanova than there is to win. If Drew Allar broke off a run but then took a big hit and kind of picked up like a little bit of an injury, that would have been way worse for Penn State than if they would have maybe played like a closer game or maybe converted a 3rd down instead of settling for a punt or something like that. But Drew Allar, he needs to just get into rhythm because I think that's kind of causing their 3rd down issues that Franklin's kind of talked about recently, and it's just these coming out against Villanova and really only leading 21-0 going into half. It's it doesn't. I'm not really confident in this team that they can go win a shootout against Oregon because Jim Knowles says Oregon's offense they have a good offense. They're probably we'll see how many points they'll score against the Jim Knowles defense, but Oregon, last season we saw them score 32 points against Ohio State when Jim Knowles was there. So it's even though Penn State they've only allowed a couple scores here and there, and even 2 of the touchdowns are garbage time touchdowns. So really, they've really only let up 3 meaningful points this season.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it's just I think they can contain Oregon to an extent, but it's the offense is probably going to have to score multiple, a lot of points, at least probably 30, maybe something like that. But then it's just, and if they're not in rhythm, that goal is not going to get met.
Yeah, kind of as you said, while I do think that, Jim Knowles, I think he has put this defense in the perfect position. Guys, if you go to psucollegian.com, you can read Let's Be Frank. And Let's Be Frank, I kind of talk about that a little bit. I don't want to spoil it, but I will say the expectations, I feel like they're going to be met and or exceeded. Again, you can check that out at psucollegian.com. Click football, scroll down, you'll see Let's Be Frank. Or you can go on Google, type in Let's Be Frank, type in psucollegian.com, you can find it. But anyways, I do think that the Penn State defense is in a perfect position to be arguably the best defense in the country. I think the question comes into, whether they have the star power to do that every single week. I think that's one that hasn't been answered yet because to have star power, I think you have to show up against big teams. Not saying the Penn State defense doesn't show up against big teams, but we haven't seen it yet. We've seen Denai Dennis Sutton do it. I think he's going to do it against Oregon. We've seen Zane Durant do it, but we haven't seen the other guys do it. Alonzo Ford, even going deep, he didn't get deep into the playoffs. He made it to Minnesota, and he was injured. Chaz Coleman, obviously, which is, one Jim Knowles talked about the other day. Obviously he's a strong guy in the pass game, but what is he going to be in the run game? And does that, does his pass rushing ability, does the spin move, does that hold up? But either way, I do think that, Penn State cannot lean on his defense to save them, especially in this season. You're going to have to play Oregon. You're going to play Ohio State. You're probably going to anticipate playing at least 4 or 5 more top 25 teams, depending, where Indiana is. If somehow Nebraska sneaks in there or however, I don't know. But, and then considering Big Ten Championship, everything else, there's a possibility that you play 5 more ranked teams after those 2 games. So I think, not after you include Indiana, but either way, I think, Penn State needs to get the offense together. I think a good point you brought up was the third down struggles, which I think that's twofold. I don't think it's just Drew Allar, or I guess you can say threefold. I don't think it's just Drew Allar. I think part of it is the run game. I think you look at, I wouldn't say Kaytron Allen. I think Kaytron Allen looks fine, even though I will say, like, you can take a 60-yard run in the fourth quarter against FIU with a grain of salt. Like, let's be real. You can do that. But, I think Nick hasn't looked the same. I think if you look at Nick, I'm actually getting a little bit of flashbacks from 2 years ago, Nick Singleton, which was really the whole running back room where they can get to that second level and then it's over. Nick's vision this year has been a bit questionable in moments. They talked, James Franklin talked about telling him not to overthink it and things like that. You look at Nick Singleton on the year, he's 4.4 yards a carry, and you would expect that to be the opposite. But even like through his career, let's be honest, Kaytron Allen has been that guy in terms of yards per carry. He's able to make those yards at the contact. I think he's really good at finding the hole and getting out there. But I think Nick Singleton just hasn't been able to get to that second level. And yes, that's going to be concerning against a team like Villanova. I think if there's anything that you should be watching out for against a team like Villanova, which was obviously mentioned in the question that week, is like tackling. Like lower level teams aren't used to tackling, your future NFL like Hall of Fame. I'm not saying Nick Singleton is, like, there's possibility, but not saying he is. But like, again, like getting out of class, taking the bus up to Penn State, and having to play against the world's best running backs in college football. The best running backs in college football every week is not something that you kind of look forward to every week. So I think that's one thing. If you're not able to really break those things, if you're not able to see the holes, because the holes were there, I think the offensive line was a point of concern early. But as I kind of expected, it was more about, okay, we're trying to get 7 guys in, which I feel like, I haven't seen the snap numbers, but I feel like they've done a little bit less in terms of substitutions compared to that first game. That first game was kind of like every single second they were making a different substitution, which it can affect chemistry. If you talk about, getting on combo blocks, being able to have one guy peel off, whatever. Oh, I know this guy's going to take him, so he's fine. Oh, he flashes over. Like, there's a lot of things that goes into an offensive line, which is why singular offensive linemen never really get the praise. It's a whole unit. It's really about being in sync. It's really about, obviously knowing your assignment, but you have to know another guy's assignment. You have to know, this guy's going to take him. You have to know all of that. So I think that was a factor early. But I do think the offensive line, has stepped up. So it's really going to come down to Nick Singleton breaking these runs. Again, I think it is 3 games in, so you can kind of take that with a grain of salt. I don't think it's completely over at all. I think there's a lot of time to right the ship. And I think the bye week is a time to really get that together. You see guys, taking rest. Like, obviously we saw Deniden Sutton with his helmet off at practice. That was one of the guys Franklin seemingly mentioned, when we talked about, okay, what is kind of that balance between getting guys too many reps and, letting them rest and because it's bye week. He's like, some guys aren't going to really take those reps. Again, Deniden Sutton with his helmet off. I'm sure a lot of different guys throughout practice, had times where they could just kind of chill out and relax. They obviously had the back half of the week off. But, yeah, I think in terms of Penn State going into the bye week, I think a lot of the, things that they want to hammer out has to do with the offense. Obviously we can still take a look at the defense. Do you think there's anything that the defense needs to kind of hammer down, or anything that was kind of interesting coming out of the bye week that they're working on?
Yeah, obviously at this bye week, I'd say linebacker depth is still up in the air. Jim Knowles said, yesterday, it's still he's still searching for some answers there, and it's still a work in progress. And I think it was interesting to see them get Alex Tash into the mix there, because at least publicly, they haven't said anything about green lighting him, but the amount of reps he got, I believe he got 21 snaps. It's he definitely seems like if they're going to give him that type of a workload, he seems like he could be the number 3 or 4 guy in terms of number of reps as the season goes on. And then obviously you've had Keon Wiley and Anthony Specca. Those have been kind of the main depth guys at the position so far. But I think getting Tash in there a bit more, that could maybe jumpstart something there. But it's not too big of a problem, because I'd say because the top 3 of Tony Rojas, Amari Campbell, and Dom DeLuca, that's a pretty good top 3. It's for sure. But it's if say something happens, one of them ends up being unavailable for a game, it's then there's going to be issues, and it's a young guy who doesn't really have much experience could get thrusted into a big moment. Oregon is if if say like Anthony Specka, Keon Wiley, or Tash is like playing like some key third downs, like I mean, obviously you're going to want to have top three there, but if they're not available, it's like one of them that could be an issue there, and something Oregon could exploit if one of Penn State's depth pieces at linebacker are out in the field. But otherwise, in the secondary, I'd say it's interesting to see Kenny Woosley get into the nickel spot. I mean, he was talked about like a lot this off season by Knowles. He was kind of like a player to watch at the nickel spot, and for him to get the amount of reps he's gotten, even with Zion Tracy coming back, I think that's a kind of like a bright spot in terms of like his development and where he's at. But otherwise, it's like defense in general has been pretty lights out, I'd say. I mean, like I said, it's like they've allowed a field goal and 2 touchdowns this season, and both of those touchdowns were garbage time touchdowns. So it's hard to really like nitpick that much as of now.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting kind of thinking about that. Like, if you look at Penn State's defense, if you compare it to the offense, first, they definitely substitute a lot more. I saw a lot of the times where, at least on the defensive line, and of course, again, you can talk about, putting Woosley at the nickel, Zion Tracy, them working in. You can look at the safety room, but there were a lot of substitutions in that game. I feel like kind of every drive another guy was getting tried, which obviously could be a thing with, okay, we know these guys are not really going to score much on us. Let's do this, do that. But also, I think for Penn State, I think it's just them Jim Knowles really getting these guys comfortable. I think they've shown comfortability in that defense. I mean, talking to King Mack after the game, who did earn the starting job after, not starting in those first 2 weeks, he's like, the one thing that I learned is, like, I just have to play the play, and it's going to come to me. Like, play my assignment. It's going to come, and that's something he just had to learn. Sometimes he's trying to do too much. Obviously sometimes he's like, oh, I'm going to get here because I know that, like, play your assignment. Jim Knowles has got it, really. That's what it is. He's the mad scientist. You can trust Jim Knowles. I mean, I think that was kind of the biggest kind of takeaway from that. But, yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the defensive room, I think that the fact that they've had this success with the amount of substitutions that they've had, again, you can take it with a grain of salt with their competition, but at the same time, I feel like if you can criticize the offense for not showing up, the defense can deserve the same praise for showing up, which, again, is something that I talked about on Let's Be Frank. Again, psucollegian.com, click football. You can click Let's Be Frank, and it'll be right there. But, yeah, I mean, I think that'll be interesting to look at. If you look at the linebacker room specifically, I think it'll be interesting to see exactly where Alex Tash is because, again, this is a guy that last week Dan Connor mentioned about 3, 4, 5 times. Like, I'm listening to the Zoom, and I just keep hearing Alex Tash, Alex Tash, Alex Tash. I'm like, this is unfamiliar territory. I haven't heard this one before. Like, obviously, Alex Tash, 4-star in-state guy, 247 Sports Composite, number 8 player in Pennsylvania. So he did come in with some expectations, but it was kind of similar to how Anthony Specka was last year. Out of nowhere, middle of the season, he was that kind of pleasant surprise guy. But I mean, I think the interesting part about that was he still never became that. Again, it's early, he's in the second year. He can obviously rise to become that. But the way they were talking about him, it seemed like he was ready to be the starting Mike as soon as Kobe King stepped off of campus, as soon as he headed to Minnesota, whatever, as soon as he headed to the combine, honestly, like he was ready to step in. But obviously that hasn't been the case. I mean, I even talked with Tamir Robinson, I think it was the Fiesta Bowl, and he was saying like he's a really good backer. He can play all 3 positions and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think that depth overall is important. I mean, I think you play in a 4-2-5, and that puts a lot of stress on the linebackers. Obviously, some talk has been about the safeties, and I mean, obviously, it's football. One guy can miss an assignment, and the play, you'll give up a touchdown. Like that's really what it is. But I think a lot of responsibility is on those linebackers in that second level because if things get past the front 4, you got to make that play, or you're relying on safeties, you're relying on cornerbacks, to go make that play. I mean, I think Tony Rojas, that was something he mentioned in the offseason. It's like, we now run the show. It is on us to do so. So I think that depth is important. Obviously, you'll have Amari Campbell, Tony Ross, and Don Luker, all guys who you should trust to start on just about any, if not any, college football team in the country. But I don't think that's the end-all, be-all. I think you have to have more. I think Keon Wiley, he's been playing a lot. I think that's an encouraging sign. But if they can lock in, I can have at least a second mic for sure, a third mic because, especially in these long, grueling games, to get guys in and get guys the rest they need, I think that'll be very important. But, yeah, I mean, I kind of want to transition into something else. Yesterday, the NCAA passed a rule where there will no longer be a spring transfer portal. There will be one portal window. That date has not been decided yet. It's proposed to be around January 2nd to January 9th, around that. Don't quote me, but just around that. Will, I just kind of want to get your reaction on it. What do you think of that? Do you think that'll be, a positive thing for college football moving forward?
Yeah, I think the problem still is that it's going to happen during the college football playoffs. I mean, obviously, it's not as bad as like the one that opened in like early December, where it's like bowl games hasn't even started yet. But it's gonna, if the January 2nd one, if that ends up being the case, that's gonna be around when the quarterfinals are happening. So it's gonna be interesting to see like players on teams that are still playing, if the teams allow those players to keep playing. I mean, obviously we saw the Bo Prabula situation last year where he wanted to keep playing, but Franklin just basically just told him to like worry about the portal and like visits and all that stuff. But I mean, yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting because it's also the spring portal. If that's goes away, because Penn State they were a pretty big benefit to the spring portal this past offseason with the additions of Amari Campbell and Trevor Pena. So it's going to be that's an interesting, because like teams aren't going to have spring ball to kind of see where they could maybe still add someone else and bolster some depth somewhere, or get, in Penn State's case, 2 starters that are playing very meaningful reps for them this season. But I mean, yeah, it's like I feel like the issue of it still happening during the season is still there, but it's definitely not as bad as when it started in December.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly anticipate James Franklin having his list of complaints if he wants to answer right now. Obviously, he's a big I don't really want to be asked that during the season, but then he also still gives an answer, so I'm not really sure where he really is with that. But I mean, I think that's one of the things he's talked about, having one portal. Obviously, the academic schedule is a problem, but this year the national championship is on January 19th. If it goes through in that proposed window that's around January 2nd to 10th, 11th, whatever it is, that will fall, during or right after the semifinals, which I will say, if it has to be during the season for academic reasons, and I do think they can work on that for the future, that might be the best case scenario. It's only 2 teams left. You kind of know the guys who are going to transfer, but again, that could also be a distraction to both of those teams. You can have another situation like Bo Prabula. So I mean, I think that'll be kind of the most interesting point of it, but I don't know that it's a terrible idea. I think that having that one window is going to make things a lot easier. I think that also puts more emphasis on teams to, make sure they get their guys, and you don't have to worry about these spring games and stuff like that, because now we can honestly say, bring back spring games. We don't have a problem with that. We can do another Golden Dueling column one day on psucollegian.com, but like that, I think that'll be probably one of the biggest things that comes of it if the window is in January. Well, that's all we have for today. Penn State's on a bye week, but we're not. So you can head to psucollegian.com to check out more coverage. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. As I say every week, psucollegian.com. Click the newsletters at the top. You can click football newsletter to have a newsletter curated to your inbox every Friday and every Sunday. But other than that, that's all we have. Again, psucollegian.com. We will see you next time.